Have you ever felt that the more you think deeply, the more you isolate yourself? That the deeper your understanding becomes, the less people around you are willing to listen? It's not just in your head. In fact, this phenomenon has been observed throughout history. Society has long feared deep thinkers, not because they are wrong, but because they often see things others prefer to ignore. From Socrates to Nietzsche, from Galileo to Tesla, brilliant minds have faced ridicule, silence, or outright rejection, not because they lacked intelligence, but because their ideas made people uncomfortable. This phenomenon is not new. In fact, it is deeply embedded in the human experience. Throughout history, the greatest minds have been either ignored or feared because they challenged the status quo. Nietzsche, for example, spoke of a higher kind of intellectual, one who, instead of adhering to the norms and values of society, creates their own set of truths. But why does this happen? Why do societies resist those who think differently, especially when those thinkers seem to possess a deeper understanding of the world? To understand this, we need to dig into the psychology of human nature. Consider this. When you stand next to someone who is physically stronger than you may admire their strength, but you don't necessarily feel threatened. If you meet someone who is wealthier than you might feel envy, but that doesn't directly challenge your sense of self. But when you encounter someone who thinks on a deeper level, someone who questions the very things you take for granted, something shifts. Psychologists call this the mirror effect. A deep thinker doesn't just present new ideas, they reflect back to others the limitations of their own thinking. Even if they remain silent, their very presence can highlight the deficiencies in others' understanding. This reflection makes people uncomfortable. They feel inadequate because the deep thinker reminds them of their own intellectual limitations. This in turn creates resistance. People don't want to be reminded of how little they know. It's a defense mechanism. But why does intelligence provoke this kind of reaction? The answer lies in how the human brain is wired. Intelligence is not an external quality like wealth or physical strength. Instead, intelligence is tied deeply to our sense of self. It shapes how we view the world and how we define ourselves. When we encounter someone who thinks more deeply or questions things we consider unquestionable, it can feel like a direct challenge to our identity. It's not just about the ideas themselves, it's about how those ideas make us confront uncomfortable truths about our own limitations. This is where Nietzsche's philosophy becomes relevant. Nietzsche's exploration of the Übermensch, or overman, speaks to this very idea. The overman is someone who creates their own values and definitions of truth, someone who rejects the comfort of societal norms in favor of intellectual autonomy. Nietzsche believed that the masses were more inclined to cling to false comforts and illusions rather than challenge their existing beliefs. The deeper one thinks, the more isolated they inevitably become, because in Nietzsche's view, most people would rather live in comforting ignorance than face the harsh realities of existence. So why has this dynamic persisted throughout history? Why are deep thinkers often cast aside or silenced? The reason lies in the tension between intellectual truth and social comfort. People crave certainty. They seek ideas that reaffirm their existing beliefs, ideas that make them feel comfortable and safe. But deep thinkers, like Nietzsche, are not concerned with making others feel comfortable. They pursue truth, even if that truth is uncomfortable. For Nietzsche, intellectual exploration meant questioning everything, from the morality of society to the very nature of existence. His work was revolutionary, but it was also deeply unsettling for those around him. In many ways, his ideas are still radical today. He proposed that we must embrace the chaos and discomfort of life, accepting that truth may not always be pleasant. The uncomfortable truth for many people is that they would rather remain in their comfort zones, where life is predictable and stable, than confront the uncertainties that deep thinking brings. This discomfort is not just an intellectual barrier, it's an emotional and psychological one. Deep thinkers often find themselves in a position where their intellectual pursuits make it harder to connect with others. When people are unable or unwilling to engage with challenging ideas, it leads to social isolation. Nietzsche's own life was marked by this isolation. His writings, filled with profound insights and critiques of society, often fell on deaf ears or were misinterpreted by the masses. His rejection by the larger public was not due to a lack of understanding, but rather because his ideas forced people to reflect on their own inadequacies, something most of them were unwilling to do. So what can we take away from this? If you've ever felt alone in your thoughts, know that you are not alone in your experience. The deep thinker has always existed as a figure of isolation, misunderstood, and often rejected. It's not a personal flaw, it's simply the cost of seeing the world more clearly than most. Nietzsche argued that only by embracing this isolation and the discomfort that comes with it can an individual begin to truly grow. To think deeply is to step away from the crowd, to stand alone in the pursuit of truth, even when that truth leads to discomfort and isolation. Nietzsche's philosophy encourages us to move beyond the fear of rejection, to embrace our intellectual independence, and to seek out our own truth, even when it means standing apart from the masses. The journey of a deep thinker is never easy, but it is one of profound self-discovery. By rejecting societal norms and embracing intellectual exploration, Nietzsche offers us a path that leads not to comfort, but to genuine freedom. The freedom that comes from thinking for oneself, no matter how uncomfortable that may be. As Nietzsche often pointed out, the search for truth is not an easy journey. Those who truly seek it are often forced to step outside of the comfortable boundaries set by society. And once they do, they realize something crucial. Society does not reward truth. It rewards comfort. This discomfort is tied directly to the human need for social belonging. Think about it this way. For most of human history, survival was not about being the smartest person in the room. It was about fitting in. If you didn't fit into the tribe, if you didn't adhere to the social norms, you were cast out. And being cast out often meant death. This is why the brain's defense mechanisms are so strongly tied to social dynamics. When someone challenges social norms, they threaten the stability of the group, and the group will instinctively fight back to preserve its cohesion. It's not that the group is malicious, it's that the fear of being socially isolated triggers a primal survival instinct. When someone thinks on a deeper level, it disrupts the comfortable balance of society. Suddenly, questions arise about the way things are done, about accepted beliefs, and about the purpose of life. For those who are not ready to confront these questions, this disruption can feel threatening, and that threat doesn't just live on an intellectual level, it triggers emotional responses as well. Nietzsche recognized this tension in his writings. He saw that the higher the intellect, the greater the alienation. For him, those who sought to think deeply were bound to face rejection and isolation. Nietzsche's own life was marked by a deep sense of loneliness, as he saw clearly the inability of society to engage with his ideas. His philosophy emphasized the need for individuals to forge their own path and to embrace their own truth, even when it meant standing apart from the herd. This brings us back to the mirror effect. When a deep thinker presents ideas that challenge others' views, it doesn't just spark intellectual disagreement, it sparks an existential crisis. People are forced to reflect on their own limitations, and for many, that reflection is too uncomfortable to face. It's easier to dismiss the deep thinker than it is to confront those inner fears. The mirror effect explains why those who challenge society's norms are often met with such resistance. Deep thinkers don't just present alternative ideas, they hold up a mirror to society, forcing others to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves. This can create fear, anxiety, and a desperate desire to shut the deep thinker down. After all, if someone else's ideas make us question our beliefs, we may feel like we're losing control over our own sense of reality. This is precisely why Nietzsche believed that intellectuals are often alienated from society. He saw intellectual isolation as an inevitable consequence of the pursuit of truth. In his view, those who dared to think beyond conventional boundaries were destined to be misunderstood, ignored, or rejected. And while this isolation may be painful, it is also a sign of true intellectual freedom. Nietzsche's philosophy calls for the embrace of this isolation, the acceptance that to think deeply is to be apart from the crowd, and that this separation is not a curse, but an opportunity for profound self-discovery. This brings us to one of Nietzsche's most significant insights. The pursuit of comfort and the avoidance of discomfort is a central driving force in human life. Most people prefer stability and predictability in their lives. They seek happiness in relationships, wealth, status, and routine pleasures. The problem is, these pursuits, Nietzsche argued, are ultimately distractions from a deeper understanding of the self and the world. The average person, according to Nietzsche, lives in a state of sleep. They are not truly awake to the deeper truths of existence. Instead, they follow what is socially acceptable, seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. But deep thinkers are not content with comfort. They see the flaws in the world. the false narratives that society has constructed to maintain stability. And this is where the tension arises. The more one sees through the illusions, the harder it becomes to fit into the mold of societal expectations. Nietzsche often described the average person as living in a state of sleep. They are not truly awake to the deeper truths of existence. Instead, they follow what is socially acceptable, seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. But deep thinkers are not content with comfort. They see the flaws in the world, the false narratives that society has constructed to maintain stability. And this is where the tension arises. The more one sees through the illusions, the harder it becomes to fit into the mold of societal expectations. Nietzsche's philosophy is fundamentally challenging to the established order. He believed that society was built on shallow, materialistic pursuits. People were encouraged to follow conventional paths, chase after things like wealth, status, and comfort, things that gave a false sense of meaning and purpose. The result was a society full of individuals who, while outwardly successful, were inwardly disconnected from the deeper truths of life. This superficiality was comforting, but it was also stifling. In his writings, Nietzsche was not merely criticizing society for its shallowness, he was critiquing the very values that shaped human existence. For Nietzsche, these values, rooted in comfort and predictability, held individuals back from discovering their true selves. Comfort, he argued, makes us complacent. It keeps us from embracing the discomfort that is often necessary for growth and self-realization. True progress for Nietzsche comes not from finding security in the world, but from embracing life's chaos, uncertainty, and unpredictability. Take, for example, the way many people approach their work. Society encourages us to pursue careers that offer financial stability, prestige, or comfort. But these pursuits often come at the cost of individual authenticity. How many people end up in jobs they don't love or in relationships that don't fulfill them, simply because they seek the comfort of social approval and financial security? Nietzsche would argue that this is a form of self-betrayal. By chasing comfort, we relinquish the opportunity to confront the deeper, more existential aspects of life that might lead us to a more meaningful existence. The average person is not searching for truth, they are searching for certainty. They want assurances that the life they are living is the right one. Nietzsche, on the other hand, saw this desire for certainty as a trap. Truth, he argued, is not comfortable. It doesn't come wrapped in a neat package that makes us feel secure. Instead, truth is often messy, inconvenient, and unsettling. It requires us to question the assumptions we hold about the world, about our purpose, and about ourselves. This is why Nietzsche believed that those who seek truth will inevitably be at odds with society. Truth requires us to challenge established beliefs, to confront uncomfortable realities, and to break free from the conventional paths laid out for us. But society, with its need for stability and predictability, does not welcome these disruptions. When we question the beliefs that hold society together, we risk being cast out, just as Nietzsche himself was rejected by many during his lifetime. Yet, despite the pain and isolation that come with the pursuit of truth, Nietzsche argued that it is the only path worth following. To live authentically is to embrace discomfort and uncertainty, to reject the comforting lies that society tells us, and to find meaning in the chaos of existence. Nietzsche's philosophy encourages us to question everything, to look beyond the surface of things, and to seek a deeper understanding of life, no matter how uncomfortable that journey may be. In a world that increasingly values comfort and convenience, Nietzsche's call to embrace discomfort and challenge societal norms is more relevant than ever. The modern world often prioritizes instant gratification, convenience, and safety over deep reflection and intellectual growth. But if we are to truly evolve as individuals and as a society, we must be willing to step outside our comfort zones and confront the uncomfortable truths that lie beneath the surface. The rejection of deep thinkers is not just social, it's biological. Our brains are wired for survival, not for intellectual inquiry. For most of human history, survival depended on belonging to a group, not on individual intelligence. When someone challenges the group's beliefs or ideas, they risk being excluded, and this exclusion is seen as a threat to survival. When a deep thinker introduces a new idea that contradicts the status quo, the brain reacts with fear. The amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for detecting threats, becomes active. This reaction is not just intellectual, it's primal. The group is not just intellectually threatened by new ideas, It feels an emotional, biological threat to its very survival. This is why people resist change so fiercely and why deep thinkers are often met with hostility. Nietzsche understood this dynamic well. He knew that the intellectual journey is not just one of learning and discovery, but of constant battle. It's a battle against the forces of conformity, against the pressures of social expectations. Nietzsche believed that only those who were willing to endure this battle could achieve true greatness. He called these individuals Übermenschen, or overmen, people who transcend the limitations of society and live according to their own truths. The problem, however, is that most people are not ready for this level of intellectual confrontation. They are not prepared to face the discomfort of questioning their beliefs and values. This is why deep thinkers are often rejected, not because their ideas are wrong, but because they challenge the very foundation of what others hold dear. At the heart of this resistance is the fear of change. People resist new ideas not because they are inherently bad or dangerous, but because they force us to confront the possibility that everything we've believed up to that point may be wrong. This fear of change is not just an intellectual reaction, it's a deep-seated emotional and psychological response that has evolved over thousands of years. In a tribal society, questioning the status quo could have meant the difference between life and death. Rejecting the group's beliefs could have led to exile and ultimately extinction. This is the core of what Nietzsche referred to as the slave morality. He saw the masses as bound by fear, passively accepting the values imposed upon them by society. Those who sought to challenge these values, to think for themselves and create their own meaning, were seen as a threat to the established order. This dynamic, according to Nietzsche, is what keeps people trapped in mediocrity. They are so afraid of the existential risks involved in questioning their beliefs that they prefer the comfort of the status quo. This brings us back to the concept of the Übermensch. Nietzsche's idea of the overman represents the individual who is able to break free from the shackles of social norms and create their own values. The overman is someone who does not conform to society's expectations, but instead embraces their own intellectual freedom, even if it means living in isolation. The path of the overman is not an easy one, but it is the only path that leads to true self-actualization. The rejection of deep thinkers is not just social, it's biological. Our brains are wired for survival, not for intellectual inquiry. For most of human history, survival depended on belonging to a group, not on individual intelligence. When someone challenges the group's beliefs or ideas, they risk being excluded, and this exclusion is seen as a threat to survival. When a deep thinker introduces a new idea that contradicts the status quo, the brain reacts with fear. The amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for detecting threats, becomes active. This reaction is not just intellectual, it's primal. The group is not just intellectually threatened by new ideas. It feels an emotional, biological threat to its very survival. This is why people resist change so fiercely and why deep thinkers are often met with hostility. Nietzsche's philosophy is fundamentally individualistic. It emphasizes the importance of the individual in shaping their own destiny, independent of societal norms and values. In a world that often seeks to impose conformity, Nietzsche urged individuals to find their own path and to embrace their unique gifts and talents. This emphasis on individuality is one of the reasons Nietzsche's ideas are so revolutionary. He believed that each person must create their own values, their own meaning in life. In this sense, Nietzsche's philosophy is a call to action, a call to break free from the constraints of society and to forge a path that is true to one's own nature. But the path of the individual is not an easy one. It requires a willingness to challenge the established order and to resist the pressures of conformity. The individual must stand firm in their convictions, even when the world around them is pushing them to conform. Nietzsche recognized that this journey is difficult, filled with loneliness, rejection, and hardship. But he believed that it was only through this struggle that the individual could reach their fullest potential. To be truly free, according to Nietzsche, is to live authentically, guided by one's own values and truths. The notion of the individual, as the creator of their own destiny, is at the core of Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, or overman. The overman is someone who has transcended the limitations of society and created their own values and sense of purpose. This individual is not bound by the expectations of others, but instead lives according to their own understanding of the world. They are, in Nietzsche's terms, the ultimate expression of human potential. However, this process of self-overcoming is not without its challenges. Nietzsche warned that society would resist the individual who seeks to break free from its confines. The individual who steps outside the norm risks being ostracized, rejected, and misunderstood. This is the price of intellectual independence. But Nietzsche believed that this cost is necessary for true greatness. Only by embracing one's individuality and by refusing to conform to societal expectations can one achieve true freedom. In today's world, the pressure to conform is perhaps more pronounced than ever. Social media, consumer culture, and mass entertainment all promote a narrow set of values that prioritize material success, superficial beauty, and instant gratification. These external forces push individuals to follow the crowd, to adhere to the standards set by others, and to measure their worth by the approval of the masses. Nietzsche's philosophy calls for a radical rejection of these societal pressures. It urges individuals to resist the temptation to conform and instead embrace their own unique path. This path is not easy, and it is often fraught with difficulties, but it is the only path that leads to true self-fulfillment. One of the challenges that Nietzsche's philosophy presents is the need to confront our deepest fears and insecurities. To live authentically means to question everything we've been taught, to examine our beliefs and values, and to reshape them according to our own understanding of the world. This process of self-examination can be uncomfortable, even painful. It forces us to confront the parts of ourselves that we might prefer to ignore. But it is through this confrontation with our own limitations and weaknesses that we grow. Nietzsche believed that true growth comes not from avoiding discomfort, but from embracing it. The individual who is willing to endure hardship, to question the status quo, and to live according to their own values is the one who will achieve greatness. In this sense, Nietzsche's philosophy is a call to embrace the struggle, to take responsibility for our own lives, and to become the creators of our own destiny. It is a call to resist the pull of the crowd and to live authentically, even when it means standing alone. Finally, we come to one of Nietzsche's most provocative ideas, the concept of the eternal return. This is the idea that life, in all its complexity and contradiction, repeats itself eternally. Every action, every moment is destined to be relived infinitely. Nietzsche posed a simple but profound question. If you had to live your life over and over again, exactly as it is, would you embrace it or despair? For Nietzsche, the eternal return was a test of the individual's commitment to life. It was a challenge to live authentically, to fully embrace the world in all its beauty and tragedy, to live as if every moment were eternal, to affirm life's inherent meaning, even in the face of suffering, is the ultimate act of self-overcoming. Nietzsche's concept of the eternal return is not about fatalism or resignation. Rather, it is an invitation to live fully, to embrace every moment, and to find meaning in the most challenging aspects of existence. In practical terms, the idea of the eternal return asks us to reflect on the choices we make in our daily lives. If you had to live your life exactly as it is, again and again for eternity, would you be satisfied with the life you are living? Would you regret your decisions, your actions, your relationships, or would you embrace them fully? Nietzsche's challenge is to live in such a way that, if you had to repeat your life forever, you would find joy in it, despite its imperfections and suffering. This concept forces us to confront the deepest aspects of our existence. It calls us to question how we live, how we relate to others, and how we find meaning in our lives. In a world that often prioritizes achievement, success, and external validation, Nietzsche's idea of the eternal return challenges us to look inward and to find meaning in the simple act of being. It reminds us that the most profound and fulfilling moments of life are often the most fleeting, and that true greatness comes from fully embracing the present, no matter how imperfect or challenging it may be. The eternal return also asks us to consider the nature of suffering. In a world that often seeks to avoid pain and discomfort, Nietzsche's philosophy suggests that suffering is an integral part of life. It is through suffering that we grow, that we learn, and that we transcend our limitations. The eternal return forces us to see suffering not as something to be avoided, but as something to be embraced, because it is an inseparable part of the human condition. Living in this way, according to Nietzsche, is the ultimate expression of freedom. It is the freedom to live authentically, to create meaning in a world that often seems chaotic and meaningless, and to embrace both the joys and the pains of life with equal vigor. The eternal return is not a burden, it is a gift. It is an invitation to live fully, to experience life in all its complexity, and to find meaning in the moment, no matter how fleeting it may be.